Greetings, friends. My name is Peter, and this is Retro Unscripted. This is a continuation of episode 18, part 2, if you will, in what is now going to be a 3-part series, as I realize now that I have quite a few baseball games to show, and I certainly don't want to be giving you guys epically long videos. So this part of episode 18 is going to cover the Super Nintendo baseball games that I have in my library and some comments about them. For example, this is Extra Innings behind me from Sony ImageSoft. This was one of the first baseball games that came out for the Super Nintendo in 1991. I remember this game because a buddy of mine in Worcester actually bought the game and brought it over to a mutual friend's house, so all of us just kind of saw it, because at the launch of the SNES, there were only so many games available, so there were games that a lot of us bought at the same time, and then there were some games that some of us bought that others didn't buy, so meeting up at one particular friend's house was the best way for us to sample everything, and this was one of those games. I was not impressed with it back then, and the reason that it's in my library today is largely because there is one particular team in this game that is actually comprised of gaming press members, which I thought was pretty funny. Writers like Andy Eddy and Bill Kunkel are on this particular team. Don Nauert's also on there, and he was a member of the U.S. National Video Game Team. So I thought that that was pretty neat. The game overall plays like your basic baseball game, not really a lot to differentiate it, except for the fact that there are some biometrics and such in the game, or biorhythms, I should say. So depending on a player's condition, that will dictate how the player acts or plays on the field. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So that's Extra Innings. Let's see. I wanted to put these in order for you, but I didn't, so I'm just kind of skipping around. The other baseball game that I played at launch was Super Bases Loaded, which completely turned around my opinion of the Bases Loaded games. In fact, well, I can't stand the NES games, as you remember from Part 1. The SNES games are a completely different beast altogether. The fielding is a lot better. The pitching is a lot better. The hitting is a lot easier. And the way that the game is approached is pretty unique. It's not necessarily whether you win or lose. Of course, winning is important. But it's all about having a perfect game in this particular game. Not giving up any runs. Not perfect in the sense of no hits, no walks, but perfect in not making any errors, not striking out, not getting caught stealing. Just minor things here and there, fundamental things that if you don't commit these flaws, can have your end-of-game evaluation turn out a lot better. And I thought that that was an interesting way to approach the game, rather than the usual just beat the other team and move on kind of scenario. There were 3 Super Bases Loaded games on the SNES. The second one, unfortunately, I don't own. This is the third game, which is Licensed to Steal. Plays a little bit more arcadey, I think, the third game does, and certainly looks a bit different than the first game. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think it's a little bit of a regression for the series, which is kind of disappointing. Now, the second game, which I don't have in my library, but I do have fond memories of, because I bought that the same day that I bought ActRaiser 2. Go figure. When I first had the system, granted. It's notable because it used Mode 7 for some of the fielding, so when the batter would hit the ball when you're in the field, the field would kind of shift and rotate around, and I thought that was pretty novel. Not necessarily making it a great game, but it was certainly interesting for the time. And I'm hoping to find it again for my library to wrap up the series. Okay, there are people who really love these games, and I don't necessarily blame them, but I'm not very good at them. Ken Griffey's Major League Baseball and Ken Griffey's Winning Run right here. I tend to favor Winning Run a little bit more than the first game, but both games are still a lot of fun to play. and that's really all I have to say about them, to be honest. I haven't played a lot of these, although I've heard how good they are. I just bought them because they're cheap, and I liked Winning Run because it's a Rare game, and of course games from Rare I tend to have a little bit of an affinity towards because I haven't played very many that were bad. And this used the same kind of advanced computer modeling that Donkey Kong Country used for the players and such, so that was pretty interesting. Now, there aren't very many games that I buy that I regret. This is one of them, however. This is MLBPA Baseball from EA Sports. This game is just awful. It looks fine, but the gameplay just does nothing for me. It's not really accessible, and it's ordinary. The best part of the game is the fact that there are Major League Baseball players in the game, and that really doesn't do enough or mean enough for it to stand out against any of the other baseball games for the Super Nintendo or other systems. So, but I have it, and that's that. Excuse the cough. I'm still not 100% from the cold that I had a few weeks ago. So, this I'm really glad I found. This is Relief Pitcher, which is a port of an arcade game from Atari. And the way that this game works is you're actually put into a relief pitcher situation where you're either up a run or you're down 2 runs and you have to hold the other team off from scoring. So you actually do play offense and defense in the game, but I like the situational baseball that this game offers. So I think it is a pretty neat concept. This also comes from Left Field Entertainment. You probably recognize them from doing other games later on. They're famous for the World Series of Poker games, for example. I believe they also did, if I remember correctly, they did Slam and Jam Basketball for the 3DO. So Left Field is, they came a long way from here. The next game is one that many of you may not have heard of, but one that is certainly worth looking into adding for your collection. This is the Sporting News Baseball, which is kind of a port/director's cut version of World Class Baseball for the TurboGrafx 16. But it has Major League Baseball players in it. It has a battery backup so you can save your statistics. And it's a pretty fun baseball game to play. I tend to lean on this game more for the nostalgia aspect than for the actual game aspect. Since I don't have a TurboGrafx in my library, this comes as close to World Class Baseball as I've seen. And because I liked World Class Baseball so much, this is a more than competent substitution for it, until such time as I stumble across a TurboGrafx 16 at a thrift store, which will probably never happen. This isn't bad. I don't want to do that one yet. I'll do this one first. This is Super RBI Baseball from Time Warner Interactive. This is not RBI Baseball. This is the weird revision of RBI Baseball that just completely took everything that made RBI Baseball great and threw it out the window. The camera angle was brought a lot closer to the field, so fielding tends to be problematic. The realism of the graphics is okay, but I think that there's just too much compromised here. It tends to be less of an accessible game than the RBI Baseball that I've come to know and love is. Now, if you want to play RBI Baseball on the Super Nintendo, you can, if you find this. This is Super Batter Up from Namco, and this, for real, is RBI Baseball as it's intended to be played. It's not a perfect game. There are some issues with the graphics. They're not exactly the cleanest you'll find. There's no battery backup in here, unfortunately, so if you want to save statistics and such, you can't. It's password-driven. But still, if you're looking for a game that plays like RBI Baseball, this is it. This right here is the spiritual successor, if you will, to RBI Baseball. And if you can find it, it is worth a spot in your library. Will this be one of the games on my top 10 list? You'll have to find out later this week on the blog to find out for sure. And then the last of the Super Nintendo baseball games. And I know I haven't gone into a lot of detail on the Super Nintendo baseball games. And that's because I haven't played a lot of these in a little while. And time didn't allow for me to really refresh myself. But I wanted to at least share the ones that I had. and the memories that I have. But this guy right here, I do play a lot of. This is Super Baseball Simulator 1000. And this is basically Baseball Simulator 1000, but with better graphics and with some Mode 7 tricks thrown in for some of the superpowers. And that's okay with me, because that's really all you can ask for on the system. Sometimes you don't need to reinvent the wheel to get a decent wheel. Sometimes you just have to fix the way that the wheel is made, or make a couple of minor alterations to make the wheel better. And that's what Culture Brain did here. There's some graphics upgrades, and there's a little bit more sound. The music's a little bit better. There are some new superpowers in the game as well. But by and large, this is essentially the same thing as you play for the Super Nintendo. The one thing that I do like about this is that if you're playing in a season and you're simulating games, the simulation does go a lot faster, rather than in the NES version, which takes a little while for the games to play through. So if you're playing alone in a season, playing this game will take a little bit less time. So those are the Super Nintendo baseball games that are in my library. Enjoyable for the most part. And really with the Super Nintendo, if you recall, I got the Super Nintendo in 1991 during the late summer, early fall. And that was only about 8 or 9 months after I had my NES. So I really didn't have a lot of time to experience NES baseball games until after the fact. With the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, however, I was playing baseball games on it as the baseball games were coming out. So it was really a system that I sharpened my teeth on as far as the genre goes. And as you'll see in Part 3, when I talk about the Genesis baseball games, that's when what I was looking for in a baseball game really kind of came into form in the kind of baseball games I like to play. And you will see that in Part 3, which will be available very soon, as a matter of fact, later on today. But until then, I hope you guys enjoyed watching Episode 18, Part 2. Until the next time, friends, my name is Peter, and I will see you on Part 3 for Retro Unscripted. Until then, take care.